In this video, we are going to see the demo of two different types of function, which is value returning function and a void returning function. So we will use the same example that we have used before, that is adding two numbers, but instead of using Bob please add name as we have done in the previous videos, we are going to use a different, more meaningful name, that is add two nums. So first, let us define the function prototype for the value returning function, which will add two numbers and then return the value back to the caller function. So that is going to be something like this: float add two nums. It will take an integer in1 and another floating point number, that is n2, just as before. So this is the function prototype for value returning function that return the result back to the caller. So let me just mention that. So I'm just putting a line break so that everything is visible in one screen. So that is the value returning function. Now the next one is a void returning function, that is void add two nums. Just to make it different, add two nums, no return. And here also the parameters list are same, that is int n1 comma float n2. So this is the void returning function which prints the result on the spot instead of returning anything. So that's what we are going to learn in these videos. So what happens is, so the first thing, let's define this value returning function. So let us define the function heading, which is float add two nums. So here it is, and let us do this and let us store the result float result equals n1 plus n2, and then return result. And so here it is returning the result, and since it is returning the result, it is possible to store the returned result inside a variable in the caller. For example, let's say here it is int, let's say float, let's call it result from function equals add two nums, then 5 comma 4.5. So since it is returning some kind of result, it is possible to store that inside a variable like this. Now you can print out this result. Let's see whether everything is okay or not. Result C V. So let's just print a message. which is just going to be the variable name. So here it is, and just as usual put a line break. So now if I just run this program, there is a problem. Okay, so it should be semicolon instead of comma. So now if I just run it, you can see that all right, the result is calculated, the result is calculated over here in line number 18, that is n1 plus n2. It is stored in result variable, the value is returned and then again stored inside this result from function, and then it is printed here, that is 9.5. So the 9.5 calculation is being done inside this function, but the returned result have been stored inside this variable that you can use in your caller function like this afterwards. When it is come to void function, it does not return anything. Rather, it prints the value on the spot. For example, if I just want to convert this function to void, I just have to copy and then just change this from float to void. And now if I just try to return something, return result, it is expected that I will end up in an error. So let's see what happened. So if I just try to run this, of course I ended up in an error because this is void. And then I also did another mistake. I have to change the name of the function here. So if I just run it, of course I got an error because it is void. It is not supposed to return any kind of result here, but I have returned something. So whenever the function is void, you cannot return anything. But still, what I suggest is it is possible to use just the return statement without any variable name afterwards. So I always prefer to use this like this, just use a simple return and then nothing. So now if I just run it, I can see that there is no error because it is not returning anything. Well, if you want, you can skip this return statement just like this. There is no error for that, but I always prefer to have a return statement even after the end of void. There should not, you are not returning anything, but this is a good programming practice. Just add this return statement. Now if you want to print the result in here, you can do that. There is no problem. For example, let's say cout result inside the void function equals result. So this is possible. So now if you just call this function, like let's say add two nums no return, which is this function, let's call this with the same values. So let's say here with 5, 4.5. So what it will do is it will print the result inside the void function. That is perfectly all right. So this part is no problem. It printed the result in here, sorry. So it printed the result inside this function. But if you want to store it in some other variable, let's say just like this one, result function name or something, result from function void, let's say. If I want to do this, then let us see whether I can store something or not. So just try to think what will happen. What is the expected result? Is it going to be an error or should it be correct? So let us run. As you can expect, it ended up in an error because this function is not returning anything. It is just void. So you cannot, whatever you are doing, you can print the result inside the function, but you cannot store it in a variable inside the caller. So that is all about the value returning and void returning function. You can store the value of the result that is returned by a value returning function inside a variable of the caller, but that is not possible when the function is returning void. So that is all about. Now if I just run it, now the program is correct. So this is all about your value returning function and a void returning function.